Emma Hollis was the perfect student, quiet, driven, and invisible in all the ways that kept her safe. Leonard Greaves was the perfect teacher, trusted, admired, and hiding a secret no one dared to suspect. When their paths crossed one October evening in the shadows of a school parking lot, everything Marlow Ridge believed about innocence, power, and trust shattered in an instant. What followed was a discovery so disturbing it would unravel years of silence and end with a body no one expected to find. Marlow Ridge was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Nestled between quiet forests and winding country roads, it was a town that prided itself on tradition and familiarity. People left their doors unlocked at night, waved to passing neighbors, and trusted each other without question. With just under 9,000 residents, it had all the charm of a postcard village. The town's heartbeat was Crest Hill High School, a brick building that had stood unchanged for over 50 years. It was more than just a school, it was a symbol of community, safety, and values passed down through generations. The faculty was respected, and among them, one name stood out: Leonard Greaves. He wasn't just a teacher, he was considered a role model. With his neat ties, thoughtful lectures, and endless enthusiasm, he earned the admiration of students and parents alike. He ran the after-school writing club, coached the debate team, and often stayed late to help students one-on-one. If a student mentioned struggling, Leonard noticed. If someone missed class too often, he called home. He was seen as someone who genuinely cared. It was during the fall semester when the strange feeling first began to spread quietly, almost invisibly. Some students whispered that Greaves was a little too involved, that he offered rides home, texted at odd hours, or lingered too long in conversation. But nothing ever seemed concrete. In a place like Marlow Ridge, rumors died quickly. People gave the benefit of the doubt. Adults dismissed the talk as teenage exaggeration. After all, no one wanted to believe that someone so respected could be anything less than what he appeared to be. That illusion shattered one Thursday evening in late October. The sun had already set, and the school parking lot was emptying out after a parent-teacher night. Just as the janitor was locking up the rear doors, 3 police cruisers pulled in with flashing lights. Their arrival wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was noticed. Lights bounced off the brick walls, casting strange shadows over the old gym. A few lingering parents watched from a distance, puzzled and concerned. Within minutes, officers fanned out around the school grounds. They focused on the staff parking lot tucked behind the gymnasium, an area not covered by the main security cameras. There, in the far corner, they found a school-owned sedan parked at an angle. The engine was off, but the interior windows were fogged. When they approached, they discovered signs of a struggle: a broken hair clip, a torn paper folder, and a student ID lying in the dirt. The ID belonged to Emma Hollis, a 17-year-old senior. Known for her quiet demeanor and academic excellence, Emma was not someone who made trouble. That night, she was nowhere to be found. Her parents hadn't seen her since the afternoon. Her phone went straight to voicemail. In that moment, the town's peaceful image began to crack. For the first time in years, Marlow Ridge felt uncertain. Whispers turned into panic. And the once trusted name of Leonard Greaves started surfacing not in praise, but in suspicion. The emergency call came in at exactly 6:30 p.m. The dispatcher's screen lit up with an unlisted number, and on the other end of the line was a young female voice, shaking, breathless, and terrified. The caller didn't give her name. She spoke quickly, tripping over her words, begging someone to come to the staff parking lot behind Crest Hill High School. Then, just as suddenly, the call cut off. There was no explanation, no contact information, just silence. Police units were dispatched immediately. The urgency in the caller's voice suggested something serious, more than a fight or trespassing. Within minutes, officers were pulling into the school's back lot. The sky had turned dark, and only a few floodlights lit the area. The staff lot was quiet, nearly empty except for a few remaining cars. At the far end, they spotted the school-issued sedan, its windows fogged over, the doors closed but unlocked. Something felt off. The car had no visible damage, but the inside told a different story. The front seat was reclined, papers were scattered, and a school-issued laptop lay open on the passenger side. On the ground nearby, officers found a student ID card half buried in a patch of dead leaves. It belonged to Emma Hollis. Her face stared up from the photo, smiling, unaware. Alongside the ID was a single sneaker, mud on the sole and the laces still tied. A few feet away, there was something even more troubling: blood. Not much, just a small smear on the back bumper. But it was enough to signal that something serious had taken place. While officers secured the scene, a missing persons report was filed with Emma's name on it. Her parents had already called the station that evening, worried when she didn't return home after school. She wasn't the type to disappear, they said. She was responsible, focused. Her mother had even packed her a snack that morning for her college prep session after class. No one had expected this. Detectives began reviewing security footage from the school. Most of the cameras covered the front entrance and hallways, but a few exterior feeds offered partial views of the parking lots. Just before sunset, the footage showed Emma walking across campus alone, carrying a backpack and a folder. Moments later, Leonard Greaves appeared on screen. He was walking the same direction, heading toward the staff lot. Then, both were seen briefly near the school sedan. No one else appeared. After that, the angle changed and they disappeared from view. The next morning, something unexpected happened. At 7:14 a.m., Emma Hollis walked into the Marlow Ridge Police Department. Her clothes were wrinkled and her face was pale. She said very little. Without waiting to be questioned, she pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and played a short audio file. What followed made even the most seasoned officers sit back in shock. What they heard would not only confirm the worst fears, it would also launch one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the town had ever faced. The audio recording Emma handed to detectives was just under 90 seconds long, but it was more than enough. It began with faint ambient noise, the sound of car doors, someone shifting in their seat. Then came a soft voice, Emma's, uncertain and uneasy. As the seconds passed, the recording took a sharp, terrifying turn. A male voice entered, calm at first, then firm, then forceful. The final moments captured the sounds of struggle, scuffling, something hitting a surface, a sharp intake of breath, and finally, silence. There was no screaming, only a quiet, chilling fear that lingered after the audio stopped. Detectives sat in stunned silence. The voice of the man on the recording wasn't unfamiliar. Though the clip was muffled in parts, the cadence and tone matched someone they all knew, Leonard Greaves. A warrant was issued before noon that same day. Investigators combed through the school grounds with fresh urgency. The sedan from the night before was towed and processed. Forensic teams dusted for prints and collected fibers, hairs, and anything that could link Greaves to Emma's statement. Inside the vehicle, the evidence piled up fast. On the passenger seat, they found strands of long brown hair that matched Emma's. Her backpack, partially tucked under the seat, still had her name stitched on the strap. There were smudges of blood on the center console, though the source hadn't been confirmed yet. The most damning piece, however, was a copy of Emma's college essay, one she had emailed to Greaves earlier that week for feedback. It was printed, marked with notes in red ink, and signed at the bottom with "Let's talk more on Mr. G." That note was the reason she had agreed to meet him in the first place. Despite the mounting evidence, Leonard Greaves was nowhere to be found. When police arrived at his home, it was clear he had left in a hurry. His car was still parked outside, but the inside of his house told a different story. Drawers were pulled open, some clothes missing, and his laptop gone. In the trash, detectives found a half-burned envelope with Emma's name on it, the contents destroyed. Greaves had not been home since the night of the incident. His phone was off, his bank accounts untouched, and his social media accounts deactivated. The school community reacted with disbelief. News of the incident spread quickly, and Greaves' smiling face was soon plastered on local news channels. Next to the word fugitive, students shared stories, some admitting they had always felt uncomfortable around him but had brushed it off. One student recalled how he often stayed late with girls who needed extra help. Another remembered being told not to speak about after-hours meetings. For investigators, the case shifted from a single attack to something much darker. If Emma S.'s story was true and all evidence pointed that it was, there was a real chance she wasn't the only one. Leonard Greaves hadn't just run, he was hiding. And it was starting to look like he had done this before. As the investigation into Leonard Greaves deepened, detectives began pulling records from his past, hoping to trace his movements and uncover any red flags that had gone unnoticed. What they found wasn't a criminal history. Greaves had no arrests, no formal complaints, but instead a trail of quiet transfers and unanswered questions. In the last 10 years, he had worked at 5 different schools across 3 counties. At each one, he had stayed no longer than 2 to 3 years before moving on. At first glance, the transitions looked ordinary. Some were explained by budget cuts, others by family reasons or better opportunities. But when investigators contacted administrators from his previous schools, subtle patterns began to emerge. At 2 of the schools, there had been rumors, never formal allegations about inappropriate behavior. One principal admitted that a parent had raised concerns after Greaves allegedly texted their daughter late at night. But no action had been taken. The girl refused to give a statement, and Greaves denied everything. Within months, he had resigned voluntarily. Detectives returned to Crest Hill High and began interviewing staff more thoroughly. Most described Greaves as professional, intelligent, and well-liked. But as the questions became more specific, a few teachers hesitated. One mentioned that he often worked behind closed doors with female students. Another recalled a janitor complaining about seeing him in the building long after hours. These were things that hadn't seemed serious at the time, but in the context of Emma S.'s case, they took on new weight. The most disturbing lead came from a former teacher's aide named Carla Jennings, who had worked closely with Greaves 2 years earlier. She revealed that Greaves kept a locked drawer in his classroom desk, one that he refused to let anyone access, not even during inspections. She remembered once seeing a stack of photos and USB drives inside when the drawer had been left slightly open by mistake. It had seemed strange, but not criminal. At the time, she thought he might have been overly private about personal projects. With that information, police obtained a warrant and searched Greaves' now vacant classroom. The desk was still there, the drawer locked as described. When officers forced it open, what they found confirmed their worst fears. Inside were 3 labeled flash drives, a stack of printed photos, and a handwritten notebook. The contents painted a disturbing picture: photos of female students, some fully clothed, others not taken in locations around the school. Some were selfies, others appeared to have been taken without the subjects knowing. The notebook was even more chilling. In Greaves' handwriting were dates, initials, meeting times, and coded notes that investigators would later link to specific students over the years. The writing was cold, clinical. It documented not just names, but patterns suggesting that what happened to Emma Hollis was not a one-time event, but part of a calculated history. When detectives reached out to some of the former students referenced in the notebook, a few admitted they had experienced uncomfortable encounters. One broke down in tears over the phone. She had never told anyone. Now, several victims were coming forward, each with pieces of a puzzle that was finally being assembled. But Leonard Greaves was still out there, and he knew the investigation was closing in. Winter passed in Marlow Ridge with an uneasy stillness. Leonard Greaves had been missing for months, and while the search for him continued, leads were growing colder by the day. Police had issued bulletins across state lines, but there were no credible sightings. His bank cards had gone unused, his passport remained unaccounted for, and no new digital activity had surfaced. The only thing keeping the investigation alive was the sheer weight of evidence he had left behind, evidence that pointed to a deeply disturbed man who had operated under the radar for years. Then, in early April, a fisherman made a discovery that would change everything. On the far edge of Lake Mercer, a remote stretch surrounded by trees and thick brush, he found a decomposed body tangled in roots near the shoreline. The man was face down, clothed, and partially buried under leaves and mud. There was no wallet, no phone, no ID, but a faded school district keycard still clipped to his belt was enough to raise alarms. When forensic investigators arrived, they confirmed the worst. The body was Leonard Greaves. Initial speculation pointed to suicide. The location was isolated, and there were no clear signs of trauma at first glance. Many believed Greaves had gone into hiding and taken his own life under the weight of his crimes. It seemed like a tragic, if expected, end. But as the autopsy began, the narrative shifted dramatically. The medical examiner's report revealed that Greaves had not drowned. In fact, water was never found in his lungs. Instead, he had been strangled, with bruising on his neck consistent with manual force. His hyoid bone, often broken in cases of strangulation, was fractured. There were defensive wounds on his arms and under his fingernails. Someone had fought him, someone had killed him. The discovery turned the case on its head. A man once hunted as a predator was now the victim of a homicide. Investigators revisited everything: his movements before his disappearance, the people he may have contacted, and most importantly, the victims who had come forward. One detail stood out. Among the recovered items from Greaves' hidden drawer was a photo of a girl who had never been identified. She wasn't from Crest Hill. In fact, she wasn't in the school system at all. When facial recognition was run through national databases, a hit came back. Her name was Mallory Pierce. She had attended a different school district 5 years earlier. Mallory had been reported as a runaway the year she turned 18 and vanished without a trace. Her case had gone cold. Now, Mallory was connected to Leonard Greaves. Forensic analysis revealed that her fingerprints were on the belt he was wearing when he died. No one had seen or heard from her since she disappeared, but suddenly she was the prime suspect in a murder case that no one had expected. Police issued a new alert, this time not to find Greaves but to find the girl who may have ended his life. The question left behind wasn't just whether she was guilty, it was why she had done it, and whether she had been another victim long before she became a suspect. And with her, the final chapter of Leonard Greaves' life vanished into the unknown.